I think I'd like to start, if we might, with 30 seconds of silence, please. And why don't we just start now, please? Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Again, as I said, I know that Gary would be honored to have you here. A truly good man died on Monday. He died with the same unwavering courage that marked his life, cut short by an inexplicable lung disease that left him breathless and those who loved him gasping for air at the unspeakable sadness of his loss. Gary Groesch was an honest man, ever ready to point out that the emperor was not wearing clothes. At a time when the 1960s seems to be often held up as the origin of modern moral decline and licentiousness, let it be said that Gary Groesch embodied the best of what that moral force of that era stood for, a fundamental value in the notion that the will and well-being of the many outweighs the economic interests of the few. Guys like Gary start early. They don't like bullies in the schoolyard. But unlike most of us, he would become a sort of modern-day David who could not only did not fear Goliath, but relish combat with him. He could not be intimidated. His was a heart, the passionate belief in democracy, who understood that its maintenance required constant vigilance and informed involvement. There was simply no quit in him. He was tenacious in a way that inspired those around him and exasperated those self-entitled protectors of power who could not believe that this carpenter-turned-activist had the audacity to oppose them. How wrong they were. How lucky we were. As for me, I loved Gary. I miss his incredible sense of humor with his uncanny take on the absurd in life. I miss his keen, ever-curious intellect with its sophisticated conceptual range that was always grounded in mastery of fact and detail. I know that I'm not alone in this room when I admit to having feigned interest as Gary explained some arcane detail of utility regulation, nodding my head earnestly when I hadn't the foggiest notion as to what he was talking about. But you know, it didn't really matter. You knew that he knew. The thing that I admired most in Gary was that he had the heart of an idealist balanced by the mind that was soberly pragmatic and realistic. Pure idealists get nothing done. Pure realists dare not dream. I watched at bedside as Gary stared up through his oxygen mask at his loyal friend Tom Lowenberg and struggled to cough out the words, "We dreamed big. In honor of our fallen hero, let us all dream big."
The utility companies spent millions of dollars in opposition to to this proposition in 1985, we still beat them. And it was because we were right. We needed our own local control.
Upon the steps and a baby cries. High above you can hear the church bells start to ring. And as the heaviness, oh the heaviness, the body settles in, somewhere you can hear a mother sing. Then it's one foot, then the other, as you step out on the road. Step out on the road. How much weight? How much? Then it's how long and how far and how many times. Oh, before it's too late. Call all angels, call all angels, walk me through this one, don't leave me alone. Call all angels, call all angels, we're trying, we're hoping, but we're not sure how. On every day you gaze upon the sunset with such love and intensity. Why, it's almost as if you could only crack the code, then you'd finally understand what this all means. Ah, but if you could, do you think you would trade it all the pain and suffering? Ah, but then you'd miss the beauty of the light upon this earth, and then the sweetness of the leaving. Calling all angels, calling all angels, walk me through this one, don't leave me alone. Calling all angels, calling all angels, we're trying, but we're not sure. Calling all angels, calling all angels, calling all angels, calling all angels, walk me through this, walk me through this, don't leave me alone. Calling all angels, calling all angels, we're trying, we're hoping, we're hurting, we're loving, we're crying, we're calling, 'cause we're not sure how this goes.
Hi, by the way, I'm Geoff Baldwin. I didn't introduce myself. Okay, we threw that video together fairly quickly, but I hope you enjoyed it. Okay. All right. Our next speaker hardly needs announcement. I know her to be a wonderful human being, aside from a supporter of many progressive causes throughout this city's history, and we should be very, very grateful for her presence. So I will pass the mic along, and may I please introduce to you Lady Wisdom.
I met Gary in the early 80s. I had certainly never, I'd known a lot of activists, but I'd never known one quite like him. He was tireless. He worked harder than anybody I've ever known, and I've known some really hard workers in my time. He was passionate about what he did, and he could make everybody around him passionate too. I also knew him because he and Karen were together. And we traveled together, vacationed together, had so much fun together. When I look back on those times, one of the main things I remember is not the beauty, but the fun. Gary was one of the funniest people I ever knew. And his capacity for enjoyment was just as big as his capacity for learning. He and I had one big thing in common. We were very curious. We want to know why things turn out the way they do and how they work and what makes them work. And he would do almost anything to find these things out, which was wonderful for me to be with. We could do it together. I probably don't need to tell any one of you how extraordinary he was. You probably wouldn't be here if you didn't know that. But in all my years of life, I have never met an activist more fervid, more ardent, better informed. I mean, I think he memorized everything about utility law that there was to know, and he knew lots of other law too. More eager to get his cause before the people, and more caring about the people who were affected. When I first met Gary, Karen and I, for the League of Women Voters, were doing a study of the utility problems, and we had been told by our first interviewee, who came from NOPSI, when we said, you know, if the prices are going to continue to go up, what is going to happen to the poor ratepayers? And she said, they will have to choose between power and food or medicine. Honestly, I'm not making it up. Karen can tell you the same thing. We were so horrified, and when we met Gary, we repeated this to him, and he said, she didn't tell you the half of it. He then proceeded to tell us the half of it. And after a while, not only us, but the whole League of Women Voters took positions on East Coast energy and in favor of municipalization and all the stuff that he was going for. I'm on the Alliance Board. The Alliance Board has worked very hard with him. He put that together. Karen and I were charter members, as you all probably know. At this point, I'd like to ask the members of the Alliance Board please to stand. And the advisory board, I'm sorry. And our wonderful lawyer, Tommy Milliner. I'm sorry, I have a light right in my eye, so I can't see who stood up and who didn't. I would like to tell you that while we can never replace Gary, who is irreplaceable, we will try as hard as we can to fight his fight, to accomplish the things he wanted to accomplish, and not to stop until we have done as much as he did. That's a tall order, but we're really going to try very hard.
Next on our agenda this evening, we have Linda Levy. She's speaking for herself and her husband, Greg Palast, two longtime friends of Gary's from New York City who are in, as Karen says, Gary's line of business.
My husband, Greg Palast, used to be an economist who testified against utility rate hikes, and that's how we met Gary. And Greg, well, he couldn't be here today because one of us had to stay home and take care of our 5-year-old twins, so I got to come. And Greg did write a very brief thing that I said I would read for him. So this is to Gary from Greg. My favorite memory of Gary is when I was an expert witness for the City Council investigating NOPSI about 10 years ago. He's wrong, that it was longer than 10 years ago. Gary, acting as a lawyer for the Alliance for Affordable Energy, began asking me a few easy questions, allowing me to take some shots at NOPSI's rates. I had recommended slashing NOPSI's rates to bring them to the edge of bankruptcy. The edge. But for Gary, that wasn't enough. He wanted to push those, this is Greg's language, those greedy, evil pricks at NOPSI over the edge and put them out of business. Suddenly, in front of the City Council and press, Gary went after me, a combination of Perry Mason and William Kunstler, slamming me with one nasty question after another, ripping me up one side and down the other. I didn't know what the hell he was doing. Pushing for NOPSI's bankruptcy was the right thing, the moral thing to do, but it didn't strike me as a strategically wise proposal. And that's the lesson Gary was trying